Welcome back. So here's the thing. We want to talk about how COVID-19, the pandemic, has had an effect on the vulnerable in society. That's the poor as well as those who are marginalized. Now, helping us to have this conversation will be none other than Kelvin Mogeni. But before I can even introduce him, let me just give you an overview. Let me set the table for you. It was 27th of March when Kenya put the curfew on effect. The 27th of March, this after we, around the same month when we announced our very first case here in Kenya. But out of this curfew, we have seen a bit of police brutality, especially on that very first day of the police curfew. But this is not the only time that we've seen police brutality during the pandemic. Let me take your attention all the way back to 2017. Remember baby Pendo? She was only 6 months when she died. On top of that, the latest incident being a homeless man who was allegedly shot dead here in Mathare. Joining us via way of Skype is Kelvin Mogeni. Kelvin Mogeni is the chairman of ICJ, that's the International Committee on Jurists. Mr. Kelvin, thank you so much for taking time to speak to us this morning on Citizen TV. A lot must be on your plate. I'm sure a lot that you're also observing. Allow me to just maybe begin with a general question and ask, what exactly is it that you have observed on safeguarding the rights of the poor and vulnerable in society during COVID-19? In general, before we can even get into police brutality.
What I can say is that generally, the state doesn't have facilities or policies that go so much as to protect the interest of the vulnerable people in our society. And the vulnerable people, we start off from stating that when you're poor, it will not be sort of looked at as a crime. The homeless people have been here with us for a very long period, and the government has not put mechanisms in which they can address this issue. The children, the women, the sick people, this has always been an issue that has never been taken into account.
Right.
We have got, since the 2010 Constitution, we had a provision under Article 43, which provided that the government has to put policies and measures in place to ensure that economic and social rights, that is housing, healthcare, education and other rights are being properly addressed in the society. That has not been done all these years, and no proper policy has been made to address that issue.
And here's the thing, Kelvin, you being not only a man who is a lawyer, but also the chairman of ICJ, what have you seen when it comes specifically to gender-based violence? Because even before we narrowed this conversation down to police brutality, before even we had police brutality, which has been trending for the past few days, we've seen cases of violence, gender-based violence, rise in the past few months due to COVID-19, whether it is the latest scenario here in Kenya, whether it is a woman killing the husband, burning him in a car, or the other way around. What have you noticed from gender-based violence?
You see, gender-based violence is a rooted thing that has been with us because for long we tend to hide it, but now we're in the home, we are seeing it.
Yeah.
Gender-based violence has been continuing, and it is on the rise. Now we're talking about people in close proximity who are committing these violent crimes. And it is because, we have not had mechanisms which have addressed these issues for a long period. They're continuing. The DPP yesterday said that they have classified gender-based violence as one of the special crimes that must be handled by the courts. But this issue has been rising. And right now, what we have is that people who are closely related to the victims are the ones who are committing these crimes. And this is an issue that has not been adequately addressed. And it is more prevalent, especially in the informal settlements, where these things are very prevalent and there's no information going out. We don't have health facilities to ensure that adequate information, adequate evidence is collected and addressed immediately so that the perpetrators are able to, be accountable for what they do.
How many cases have come to your attention so far that you're aware of?
We have been receiving this case on a daily basis. We get reports which are made to us, and of course we share with our partner, agencies who are involved in the questions of gender-based violence. But these reports are coming up on a daily basis, and they are spread out all over the country. Yes.
Okay, Kelvin, allow me to now change this discussion away from gender-based violence, now to police brutality. Yasin Hussein Moyo, 13 years old, he was shot by a stray bullet on 3rd floor. He's one of the latest victims of police brutality due to the partial lockdown that we've been seeing due to the effects of COVID-19. Before I can even just generally ask you specific questions, what have you been seeing for the past few days, or should I even say months, since the 25th of March, 27th of March, when that curfew came into effect?
You see, what I say, and what we repeat as ICJ is that what we have had is a health problem, but the state, classified this as a security, a national security issue, thereby responding with it, with force instead of demanding consensus in handling this health issue. So what the police did when they hear this thing has been classified as a security issue, they responded to it as if they're facing a riot. And you see, police have not been trained in a way to handle these matters so that they can approach a health issue as a health issue. So the response by the police has been brutal because they don't know any other way. They have not been treated to deal with this issue as a health pandemic. What we know and what should have been done is that when you hear the World Health Organization talking about track, trace, isolate, this does not need to result into violence. It's a very simple issue. Somebody who is likely to have an infectious disease, that this person is supposed to be isolated. Yeah? But you cannot isolate somebody you do not know whether he's sick or not.
Right.
By violating a curfew, this is another issue that the police have not made to understand. Violating a curfew is not a health issue. This is a security issue, and any violator, is supposed to be charged, fined maybe maximum of 10,000 shillings, and the maximum sentence is 3 months.
But Kelvin, if you look at the scenario, Kelvin, if you look at the scenario of what has been happening with the curfew since the 27th of March, even that same day we saw it in our very own CBD. If you had closed your business late, or if you still had a few things to, if you were found up and down on that 27th of March, we saw what happened. So as much as it's a government directive, which is very important and very key during a pandemic that we are not brushing off, but the measures that we are seeing, does that balance this equation? Does that equate to what we're seeing?
It is not commensurate. It is not commensurate to what we're dealing with. Because to have people observe the curfew, it is not a question of coming up with the violence. And because you see here, number one, we know that from that date, transport was cut by half, so that movement from the CBD to any other area has been curtailed, in a very big way. So we cannot rule out that, because that is a consequence of what the government put in place. And if you're late, and the DPP said yesterday very clearly, if you're late between 7 and 8 o'clock, that shouldn't be an issue. You should not be penalized. And even the fine itself, when you hear police are, extorting up to 6,000 shillings for failure to observe the curfew or wear a mask, that has been outrageous. Because they have taken that, into a law into themselves for purposes of, extorting money from the citizens. Yeah, this shouldn't have happened, and it's not an issue that, and even this police, when you see them putting, throwing people into a lorry or a Land Rover pickup or these Land Cruisers, 20 people into, and there's no social distancing.
Right.
And the court has ruled, police stations and prisons are not the proper place for quarantine. Isolation is supposed to be placed in a place where you avoid spreading of the pandemic. Now, here we are not dealing with the question of health, we are dealing with the question of security, and we are, responding to it as if we're having a scare in terms of physical issues. These are health issues. These persons who have been found out, they are not in themselves COVID-19 positive. They're negative. And, you've had people who have been put in quarantine who are negative. They're being isolated for no reason.
Right.
That's violating their human rights. Yes.
Right.
It's not proper.
And Kelvin, at the end of the day, the hostility of Kenyan police, our men in uniform, is well known. Even it's not a secret. Our children know it as well. When they see a man in police uniform, ask Baby Pendo's family, ask Baby Pendo's mother, she will tell you as well. So here's the thing. Do you think, as a chairman of ICJ, do you think that Kenyan police service is openly hostile towards its citizens. Whether it is baby Pendo at 6 months years old, whether it's you and I, whether it's a poor man on the streets, are Kenyan police services hostile towards its citizens?
By and large, yes, because we have got very many officers who are very good, who are responsible, who are very well trained. But I'll say this: we have criminals in the force, and I think it is the force the police service has to take issue and deal with it and root these criminals who are, because when you go out and attack people, you're not handling a security. You're not handling your duties are supposed to be done.
Right.
You should be dealt with as a criminal, because I don't think we should be talking about police excesses. We should be saying about police criminalities, and these criminals must be removed from the society. And we called upon IPOA and all the DPP and the other, including the internal affairs unit of the police, the National Police Service, to deal with these people ruthlessly. And I don't think that there is anybody who can condone brutality, whichever way it is, especially when you find a homeless person in Madara, you kill him. And I think when you talked about Hussein was not a stray bullet, because the residents say very clearly, these people, Mulika, the torch, they were torched first, they were torched, were being appointed at them, and then they were shot. Because this is not a question of a stray bullet. They're in their balcony. Why do you shoot upwards when you know that this is a high-rise area, where the residences are high? You see, as a police officer, you're trained to ensure that doesn't happen. So when you do that, this is a criminal issue, and they must be dealt with at that level. We know. IPOA said they have gotten over 85 reports of this police brutality. There are very many deaths which have occurred. What are we stopping? Is it that the police is going to become a pandemic in itself, so that we deal with it as the way we're dealing with COVID-19? Well, that is what it's becoming.
Right, and here's the thing, Kelvin, you've made a very important point there, that even if you look at the latest incident that happened in Mathare less than 24 hours ago, it's not a stray bullet that killed the gentleman. So my next question then is, do you think in Kenya we should outlaw corporal punishment?
You see, corporal punishment was outlawed many years ago. We don't have corporal punishment. The police have been using it. I don't know. It's unlawful. It is humiliating. It is a cake. We removed it under the 20 Constitution. There is no law in Kenya which allows corporal punishment. Not for children, not for adults, not for anybody. So that when you see a police officer using those canes like the Indians did in India, it is against our law. And any of those people, anybody who was seen hitting at anybody, that is causing bodily harm, assault, and they should have been held accountable. And IPOA has looked at it. They don't require any report. That information is expressed in itself. So they should deal with that issue. There is no question about corporal punishment. You saw somebody who was being, his genitals were physically being attacked by a police officer in the full glare of the camera. That is criminality. That is a very worst form of criminality. In fact, it is called torture. And when you use torture as a form of expression in this country, one should be dealt with immediately. Torture was outlawed. It is always outlawed. And you cannot use it by anybody, including police officers.
Right. So, but Kevin, at the end of the day, when all is said and done, what measures would you like to see being put in place to address the violations that we've seen during this curfew, during this pandemic?
The first thing that the government should do, and for it to be seen that it is doing something to address these violations, is to give IPOA enough resources. Because IPOA at the moment, you see, they're using police officers to investigate these things. They should be given adequate resources so that they can do the investigation themselves and deal with it without necessarily relying on the police officers to investigate. They should have adequate resources to IPOA. They be given enough resources so that they can look at these violations with a microscope and deal with them ruthlessly. The DPP has said if information is brought and the investigation has been done, he is ready to prosecute. And we are ready to, even as we are ready to undertake private prosecutions, if the DPP is not going to do it, because he has said he is willing to do it. So the investigations and prosecution can come from all quarters, both as ICJ, as a human rights organization. We collect this data, we'll give it to IPOA. If they don't deal with it, we'll proceed it to the DPP. If it doesn't, we'll undertake private prosecution. This has to be done because the society needs it, we need it, and we must root out these criminal elements from our society. It is not just the criminals out there. Even the people in the public service who are criminals, must also be dealt with. What you are seeing on the camera there, that is not proper.
Right.
Those are criminals you're seeing in uniform.
Right. And here's the thing, Kelvin. Do you have confidence? Do you have confidence that indeed these violations that we've been seeing for the past few days will be addressed, or will it be swept under the rugs? And a few days or months from now, we're having this same conversation again on police brutality.
The DPP has said very clear that they want to ensure that any investigation done on this issue is thorough. The information must be given properly, and they're not going to leave it without proper investigation so that they have convictions. And I believe that what he said was true, that he's going to deal with it properly. So what, as a citizen, what we have to do right now, let us collect data. Let's ensure that we have this information, and we have, you know, what is caught on camera. The witnesses who are watching it, they'll be collaborated. This information must be sent to the DPP, and we must back it up and prosecute. And I believe with goodwill from everybody else, this can be done. And with time, if it is shown that this information, these prosecutions are continuing, we'll have discipline in the force. And I think what we need here is goodwill.
Right. Kelvin, at the end of the day, a Kenyan will be asking, but there's a paradox in all of this. How do you have the same government investigating itself? How do you have government institutions looking into the police department on police brutality? A paradox around that. How would you answer to that?
That is the paradox we must live with, because the IPOA is yes, it's a government, but it's an independent constitutional commission. The DPP is government, but it's an independent office. So then everybody decides, because we can't bring somebody from outside there to deal with these issues. But we can only do when we realize that the government is itself condoning and colluding with these purposes to perpetrate the violence. Then we can get the assistance from the outside. But right now, the institutions that are there are constitutionally mandated to do what they are doing, and what you're seeing there can be dealt with internally here. But if it goes beyond, when we realize that it's going to be a systemized violation that is sanctioned by the government, then it can be dealt and handled by any independent international organization. African Commission on Human Rights has got a mandate to deal with it. We are signatory to it, and ICJ, we have got observer status there. We can always collaborate and ensure that these violations are properly dealt with. As of now, I'm certain that these are local issues. It does not need to be escalated to international organizations.
Right. Kelvin, at the end of the day, one rotten apple does not make the entire apple basket, rotten. One police officer does not mean the rest are bad. Could you just touch on this aspect on how we as society, as much as we are calling for justice on the cases that we've seen on police brutality, that we are careful not to box all our policemen and women in uniform under the same category, that we are not stereotyping them, that one bad cop does not mean all are bad. Could you touch on that as well?
I agree, and I think variously I've had Mr. Wino, the police spokesperson, say very clearly that it is not the entire force. They have got over 100,000 police officers. Those who are rotten, and we acknowledge those who are rotten, are few. And you see, it does not make that the entire force has got a problem. What you're saying and what we want them to do through the Internal Affairs Unit is they must acknowledge that they've got few rotten officers and deal with them. And we don't want to reach a situation where we're going to call for accountability from the very top, from the command chain. This is an issue that can be dealt with internally by themselves without us coming. But what we are saying here, those few instances, they must come out very clearly. Every time it has been reported, they must have come clearly and ensure that the public has got confidence in what they're doing and how they're going to address it. That is the main issue that affects us. Because without them coming out to say they have addressed it, we'll assume, and it's going to be assumed, that they're condoning it. Because these people are doing it in the full glare of the camera.
Right.
We have not had Mr. Wino coming out to say that these officers have been dealt with, and they've been warned, they've been disciplined, they've been they're put through their processes to be disciplined. I've not had that happen. These people go back to the base, and the officers in charge of their base are look at that one, wiping somebody using a whip and all that. And you see, this is what you call the kind of brutality that it should not be condoned. Because you see, in the very first place, we know those people who have been who are authorized to be outside. But these people you're seeing, it is not 7 o'clock. This was happening at Likoni. Yeah?
Okay.
And this violence that was being this violence was being done in the full glare of the camera.
And
you see.
Yes, go ahead, Kelvin.
Yeah, you see when you see people reacting that way, what you're not giving the public is the confidence.
Right.
You see, we should as a society, we should handle these matters through consensus, not demanding obedience. It is not a question. It's not a question of thinking that police officers are different from us in the society. We are part and parcel of the society. So that when we deal with these issues, like we have always done in the Nyumba Kumi initiative, we must remember that consensus will give us a very good society that does not require the kind of responses.
Right.
If the people realize that this is our duty, both as the governed and the governing, then we must go and follow that line of thought. It is not always good that the police, react in a way that they feel that they're different from us, that we are separate, we are animals, they are the better people. It is not that way. We are one, and if we are animals, we'll end up being all of us animals. And of course, when you have that kind of violence on the people, soon it will react, and you can see what is happening in the US. Little violence results in riots. And we don't want to see that, people in Madare reacting in the same way that the police are doing, because violence begets violence. And we don't want that to be the norm. We want officers like that who help you, sanitize you, and help you do it, but not officers who are reacting to issues with violence. And of course, violence tomorrow will become violent. And we don't want people to become violent. And I think the other issue that the Cabinet Secretary for Health and the Interior Ministry should have dealt with is that we know we have very many homeless people in the country.
Right.
We have very many homeless people in Nairobi.
Kelvin,
these people should have addressed this homelessness.
And Kelvin, here, before I let you go, this is the billion-dollar question that is on everyone's mind today. Will police brutality in Kenya ever end? Will it get to a point where, as a Kenyan, when I see a police officer, I see safety and not I'm scared for my life? Will a time like that come when we will see police brutality in Kenya end?
Yes, there will be, because as ICJ, we actually work with the police. We are a member of the Police Reform Working Group. We partner with the police to ensure that we have reforms. These have been going on, and there is a lot of change that has happened. And I think we should give the government credit where it is due, because we had these problems about bail and bond. It has been addressed. They're addressing it. The question about the cells, how the police react, this has been handled for majorly. I believe that with the reforms that we have had, the reforms we intend to have, there's going to be, let's say, good conduct of the police. But I don't think that we're going to reach a situation where we were in the 90s. Remember the Nyayo era police? We are not there. We have a lot of progress, but the progress is not good enough. The citizens demand more, and I believe that we're going to have it. And I don't think that where we are right now, we can say that we have lost it. The police, I'm sure, they're willing to reform. And the reform must also now start from down. We got reform on the top, but we haven't had reform at the rank and file down with the constables and the corporals and sergeants. Yes, but we need serious reforms. They must look at this issue that human rights is not a right to the civil society. It's a right to everybody. Because when you see a police officer being charged in court, being dismissed from service, he has a right. They are always addressed. You should look at it from the point of view that even when his rights are violated, they also are addressed, because there is nobody who is immune to violations. Even the top officers. I remember when they were being dismissed from service during the vetting, they had to go back to court and seek to be reinstated, because they acknowledge everybody has a right, and the law is what's supposed to be utilized by everybody to address these issues. The law is not for anybody, it's for everybody. It's not limited to somebody or some of the people, but it's for everybody to enjoy this right across the board. So the Constitution sets out parameters where people must give certain you give and take. It's no question of expecting 100%. So when you curtail certain rights, it must follow parameters set out in the law. You must set out very clearly, the legislature must be involved, so that any limitation to any person's right must be properly expressed, and it must be in a participatory process where the public, is made to understand that yes, this is happening because this is what expected. Yes, the pandemic came. We were not prepared for it. Nobody was prepared for it. It was not in anybody's mind in the US. It was not in anybody in the UK or in Italy. Yeah, but they have responded to it positively because people acknowledge what they do is for their benefit. But
Kelvin,
you see, we don't want to see people reacting differently.
Kelvin, I have to let you go. My last question, do you think legal services should be deemed as essential services during this pandemic?
Legal services are essential at every time. Because even citizen tomorrow, if you are shut down, you require our services. I don't think that when you arrest somebody at night, you're supposed to wait for him in custody until morning. This question of legal services must be deemed as essential, and they are essential. Because if you have been arrested in Machakos, for example, how do you expect your lawyer to reach in the Machakos?
Right.
That's the question. You can't do without that. Legal services, you cannot do it from the house when somebody is in custody or appearing before the court at Milemani at the parking lot. This is not an issue you're going to say that you cannot move, because legal services are available for everybody, whether you're in quarantine, whether you're somebody's the ministry. They require legal services themselves at the Ministry of Health. They require to address these issues because the issues being addressed are not just medical; they're also legal. Because they're not using any other parameters, because they have to follow the law to ensure that whatever they're doing is right. So the legal services, as my President Javier said, are essential services. The court has expressed so. There's an order from the court which has been made that legal services are essential. And I know Honorable Matiang'i has not done what is supposed to be done. And I hope he doesn't have to do it, because the order is an order.
All right.
Whether you obey it or not.
Okay.
Yeah?
Thank you so much, Kelvin.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And I hope that we'll see Kenya that is good for everybody.
Indeed,
very soon.
Indeed. You and I both, Kelvin. That is Kelvin Mogeni, who was joining us via Skype. Kelvin Mogeni is the chairman of ICJ. That's the International Commission of Juries, just helping us understand where we are as a country with these curfew deaths that we've been seeing and beatings that we've been seeing, not only since the past few days, but really since the 27th of March when the curfew was put into effect. He says that the state has no proper facilities to protect the vulnerable, so independent organizations such as IPOA should be given the resources to address the violations that we've been seeing. He also says that legal services during a pandemic should be deemed as essential services. That's Kelvin Mogeni. Let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back now, I want us to shift gears now into education before we can get into the other discussion of climate change. Why? Because there's a 9-member national Education Response Committee that we should be hearing from anytime soon on how and when we should reopen schools. Certain countries across the world, such as China, have reopened schools. Others, like South Korea, reopened and then had to close the schools back again. In some places that have opened schools, we've seen them do certain things a bit differently. The new normal, as you would say it, classrooms that are being held outside. So we'll be having that discussion here as a country, whether we should be reopening schools and how we should do it. After that, be on standby for the discussion on how COVID-19 has affected climate change. See you in just a bit.